Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and I am thrilled, jazzed, over the moon to be in conversation with my next guest, a professional jazz vocalist, arts executive, and the president and CEO of the DC Jazz Festival. Please welcome Sunny Sumter. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for making the time. And before we get dipped into the main theme of today's interview, I want to hear a little bit about your creative origin story. I'm always interested to see, like, what was that part, in the person's, maturation process when they realize, oh, I like music, oh, I like jazz, oh, I like painting, what have you. What was that sort of start for you? And I have a second bullet point, but I at least want to start there.
That's such a good question. It's a good entryway. So I used to sing in a Catholic choir since I was in first grade. So I always knew I had a voice. Yeah. And at about 9 years old, I used to braid my grandmother's hair. So I was braiding her hair, and she had Sarah Vaughan on the radio, on her. And I said, "Who is that?" She goes, "It's Sarah Vaughan." And I just listened, and every time I would come and braid her hair, I would say, "Can you put on Sarah Vaughan?" And that hooked me. I knew the jazz was going to be in my orbit in some way. So I went to studied at Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington has a strong classical program for vocalists, so not much jazz. They probably do now. And then I went to Howard, and, that's when it really kicked in, so pretty early.
Yeah. Early that's what I'm noticing. And thank you for taking us there a little bit, because there's a few other questions I have in that regard. But I'll say, some of those, early moments, that's always the thing. When you can trace back, it's that was the first time, or that was informative, or that was just something that really directed me to this path. I always look back at maybe middle school, maybe high school, somewhere in there where we used to have, we didn't hoard, but we had things around the house. It's why do we have recording equipment? Nobody here's a musician. So I remember I stumbled across one of these handy mics, and that was me first experiencing storytelling, recording interviews and conversations with cassette. So I read, and seeing the background, accomplished jazz vocalist, minoring in jazz voice at Howard, and also the host of Jazz Central for BTJ. So what does music, and we're speaking really macroly here, what does music, specifically jazz and the arts, mean to you?
Wow, thank you for doing your homework. I'm at a point now in the jazz journey, to call myself a jazz champion. So I really believe that jazz has a place so deserving of being loved by everyone. If we just had avenues to get us there. And so I have friends that started the Country Music Awards in Nashville because the Grammys just was not presenting country. Yeah. So they did their own thing. It took a while, but look at them now. I just saw them on the television, and it was amazing just how primetime that show has become and how primetime country is. I think that jazz has the same. And even on the Grammys recently, Samara winning New Artist, Robert Glasper winning R&B, John Beasley won for a composition along with Jeff Keezer. So many jazz, Terry Lynn Carrington won. So many great jazz artists picked up Grammys. I think there is there's an opening right now for us to really capitalize on, and so I am personally taking it upon myself to make that happen.
I immediately, when you said jazz champion, I immediately thought of you holding a belt that just has
I think, look, I love boxing. My ex-husband loved boxing and boxed himself, but yes, that's right. When I think of champion, I think of Rocky running around the room with my belt on, and winning.
And there's a preservation angle too there as well, where I go back and looking at the Chasing Train documentary or what have you, which I really dug. And, I'll say this, and I've said it before, I was one of those guys that was man, where's the hip hop, man? I used to work with my dad, and he would always play WEAA. Mm-hmm. So it's just like, man, get Gary Ellaby off here, man. Where's the trap music? And now,
thank you, Dad.
Now he's also Robert. Now as an adult, in an older adult now, like having sort of that awareness and appreciation of it, the only like physical media that's music, records, if you will, are jazz records that I have in the crib.
I love that.
So, yeah.
I am so glad to hear you say that. And jazz, look, it's a big umbrella, right? So there's a lot to pull from, and there's certainly enough, even in the hip hop genre, with Kamasi and what Robert's doing and others, that you can really still dab your whole foot in some hip hop there.
Absolutely. So we're recording this here at Eaton Radio. So we're in D.C. So it'll be remiss if I didn't ask, how would you describe the D.C. jazz scene?
So every year, the Washington Post puts out this article about jazz being a dying art form. I don't know why, but they do it every single year. And it's so far from the truth. Jazz in D.C. is thriving. It's thriving so much that I actually think it's one of the top hubs in the world for it. And I know that to be true because musicians come here and they live because they can make a living. Yeah. And that's how you know. I do think because it's a conference town, there's a lot of churches, there's just many opportunities beyond the club, beyond the concert hall, but beyond the festival, the performance space, for jazz musicians to make a living. And so it is an incredibly thriving art form. And what makes it incredibly unique is, I think, the go-go part of it as well. Is Chuck Brown, thank God, coming from North Carolina and landing in D.C., bringing just that wonderful conga with him and that cowbell, giving us the go-go. That I think that has helped to cement jazz. So where there may be people here that do big band, or they may want to do just traditional swing in a hotel lounge. There are also incredible artists that are playing jazz in, at the 930 Club, or at a coffee house just doing experimental jazz. A lot of free jazz with Bobby Hill and what he's doing with Capital Bop and what Gio and Luke are doing. So there's so many aspects of this music that you can go to depending on your taste that I think is really cool, not only for the jazz aficionado, but for the casual fan of the music too. So they come in like, hey, date night, let's go hear some jazz. It's cool. Let me get my cool points tonight.
Well, that may be a thing that I do here and there. And thank you, because I've been in the last year, outside of like work-related stuff, but let's say for play, I've been to New Orleans. It was partially work, but it was partially play. And I'll say the first thing that I had getting off the plane was music playing. It was live music. It was a band right there in the airport. I was like, that is fire. I was like, this is going to be great. And due to the nature of what I'm doing and speaking with artists regularly, I appreciate it in a much different way. And another very sort of, I guess, memory that sticks out was I was in Nashville about this time last year and just went to some club, date night situation, and it was like some swing going on.
Nice.
And I was like, I was not expecting to be here. This is not on the itinerary, but we're here. The meal was fire, by the way, because, that's part of it. And I think I proposed to the plate. That's how good it was. But also just the music really set that background for us. And it was just like one of those things that I'm going to always remember, but having that soundtrack kind of connected to it. So I think it speaks to the power of the music, power of sort of culture and connecting.
That's right. I completely agree with the whole thing about culture and connection. And sometimes, music does that for you wherever you go. It doesn't, it's just all music art forms. When you go out and you have, whether it's a meal, whether you're going to the family reunion and then the big songs come out, you go out and you line dance and whatever it is. You do find these moments and they become your memories for life. And I think jazz definitely has a place.
Yeah. So, let's dive in a little bit and talk about DC Jazz Festival. So, can you tell us a little bit about the history, core identity, mission?
Absolutely. So, the DC Jazz Festival started on a paper napkin in Adams Morgan at a restaurant called Cash's.
Wait, what?
And it started with Charlie Fishman, the former manager of Dizzy Gillespie, and his wife, Stephanie Peters. Charlie is Jewish, Stephanie is African American. and she's an attorney. At the time, she was working at Patton Boggs. Now she's at Microsoft. And Charlie, Dizzy had recently passed, and Charlie, they were having a meal, and Charlie said, why doesn't DC have a jazz festival? Now, there had been previous jazz festivals. Bill Worrell, who had DC Space, had a jazz festival here, a really fantastic one. The Spellmans, A.B. Spellman had a jazz festival here as well. There have been other attempts, but the magic number that they go away is about year 7. And so they realized that the city was not behind the festivals here as they are behind the Cherry Blossom Festival, let's say, or Folklife Festival. And so Charlie went and talked to some stakeholders in D.C. in 2004, and the festival was born. So it started in 2004 with 12 concerts on U Street. And Charlie said, we need to be big like Montreal or like New Orleans. He had this big vision. So he calls me up. I had performed at the next year, because I was still singing then, at the Monument. He started having them down at Sylvan Theater, that small little theater by the Monument. Big ones there. And so I performed at one of them. I remember because my daughter was, oh my goodness, she's like 4. And it was fantastic. So he calls me up. I was working at Aspen Institute at the time, and he said, you should come and work and do partnerships for me, because that's what I did for Aspen. I said, yeah, I'll help you. He goes, I need to build an education program, and I want the city to come together. I want everybody to know that, they can be a partner. I want to be a coalescing force, is what he said. So I came on board as a consultant and helped him figure out the education piece. We moved it to the Phillips Collection, called Jazz and Families Fun Days.
Nice.
So we did that every Saturday and Sunday, and that was like a prelude to the festival. The festival was in October, and the city said move to June, because in September, early October, it was Congressional Black Caucus. There was too much real estate happening with events. So the city said move to June. So we moved to June, and we changed the name from Duke Ellington Jazz Festival, because that's Charlie really wanted to pay homage to Duke Ellington, Edward Duke Ellington. And we moved to June, changed it to DC Jazz Festival, and the rest is history. We went from 12 concerts to 24 to 50 venues to 150. I mean, it's his vision. Everything that Charlie envisioned, it came to fruition. And so from there, we outgrew Yards Park. We were there for 4 years, completely outgrew it. I mean, it was like, when do you go to a jazz festival unless it's New Orleans, right? Or Newport, because they have 50, 60 years. At that time, we had like 9 years behind us. So we moved to the Wharf. And it's still now a great problem, but we had 68,000 people last year.
68,000?
68,000 people.
Those are ballpark numbers.
They are, but I talked a little bit earlier about the casual fan of the music. The American culture is probably international, because the folks from international community are coming because jazz is a global brand. I think a lot of people they like experiences, right? And so sometimes even for the casual fans of music, period, but let's say jazz, as we're talking about that, the music becomes the backdrop to all the other fun things that are happening. They bring their girlfriend or wife, husband, they're bringing their families, their grandparents, their children, and it becomes something that they build, another memory, right? So, and I think that's what Jazz Fest is now.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And I think it's something really big about being in the experience thing. Definitely, that's what people are looking for. Like, it's this thing where it's always a challenge to get people to come out to events. So if you get their attention, because you're fighting many things.
Yes, you are.
You're fighting social media, you're fighting the real estate, you're fighting so many different things. But if someone is like, you know what, I'm going to go to this thing even for like a half an hour, even for an hour, whatever, it's like, all right, you better put on. What you got? What you going to put on? Is that. So could you speak on a bit more like the programming within the festival? There's the education component. There's the Charles Fishman Embassy series. So talk about that a little bit.
So you said Charles Fishman because we named the Embassy series after Charlie. So the Charles Fishman Embassy series, we are lucky in D.C. that we have more than any other place in the world. We've got Embassy Row. And then we've got other embassies that are just all around. And so it's a unique opportunity for us to bring jazz from all around the world. because again, jazz is a global brand.
Yeah.
So we partner with embassies and we bring some of the most important artists. Good case in point is this amazing singer, pianist, bata player from Cuba named Melvis Santa. And Melvis she's in Kenny Garrett's band now.
Really?
Yes. She just came to the United States. She had been touring with an important horn player named Jane Bunnett that she thought it was her mission to chronicle Cuban jazz music. And so she would bring a lot of Cuban artists. And one time she had all Cuban women in her band.
Yeah.
And Melvis, I met her for the first time when we did something at 6 and I, Historic Synagogue, during the festival.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. She was really young then. She still is really young. But she's doing this thing at the Embassy of Cuba with us in a couple of weeks.
That's great.
And we're excited about that. So that's our embassy series. We partner anywhere from the Embassy of Cuba to the French, the Italians, the Japanese, Canada, Morocco. I mean, we really do have a very rich partnership history that we are excited to continue, as part of our year-round programming. The other thing is education. This morning we did Jazz Meets Go-Go, teaching its connections for DC public and charter schools. So about 400 kids came to learn about the connections. They had been studying it as part of the music frameworks. It's part of the DC music standards. And so we put it all together in a neat bow, which makes it great for teachers because they get to teach it and then they can come to us for the demonstration part of it. So we like to, when you and I were kids, music was in the regular school day, but that's not the case anymore. They're not teaching music in the regular. It's terrible.
Yeah, I had no idea.
People don't even know. But now we've got to change the laws because it's just they're teaching to the test. So they took out music, art, dance, theater, and they've even taken out in a lot of times PE.
I think that is very short-sighted. I think that is.
Look at our kids. That's the result.
Yeah.
Direct result of what we're doing in the classroom is what's happening with our kids right now, tied to the devices. Whether it's the smartphones or at home, it's the video games.
And that's one of the things that I see with it's the potential. And I think without laws and stuff being attached, I saw this thing about AI music. And it's like, oh yeah, I can sound like Jay-Z, and just this is a problem. And I remember this conversation. I think they were talking with producer Young Guru about this idea of, okay, we have laws preventing someone from taking my likeness and all of that stuff, using my content without my consent, but they could just take my voice.
Oh yeah.
It's that's really weird. And I think people are saying there's nothing to worry about. It's no, it is.
There's absolutely something to worry about, and the copyright attorneys are all over it right now because there's absolutely something to worry about. And I think with even our kids just not having an opportunity to learn an instrument, right, and to decide for themselves if they want to go into music, or it helps them just to develop their own cognitive skills. I know I became a much better thinker on both sides of my brain from all the music that I learned in school. I know that. And also even with PE, the fact that you have to go to after school to do physical education, that just makes no sense. But back to the DC Jazz Fest education program. It was named for about 7 years. It was called the Roberta Flack Education Program. Roberta Flack was on our board. Nice. And she and Charlie were very close. In fact, Charlie's son Moses, Roberta Flack is his godmother. Wow. And so we named it she said yes, because she was a DC public school teacher. So we named it after her so that we could leverage the program to get people to understand, teachers, that we'll bring you the content, but kids need to know this because we grew up listening with Bill Cosby's, having it in the background on the cartoons and other places. We could at least go to record stores. There are very few places you can go and hear jazz. So now that we're teaching it, the kids love it. We're in a lot of schools now, all over the city. Yeah. We, in addition to being in the school, we do have an after-school program as well, and then we do a story time with earliest learners that help them to gain their skills around math and reading using these storytelling books with Ella, Louis Armstrong, and things like that. So our education program is really rich, and we are excited that's actually probably 50% of our work.
Wow.
Because if our kids don't become musicians, they become our jazz fans.
Yeah.
And so in a way, the essence of the education program is to build tomorrow's jazz audience.
It's a version of like choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
I dig it.
It's pretty fun.
And as a secondary note, I got some fest questions, some jazz fest questions, but I watched this show. I consume a fair amount of media, and I watch Perry Mason, and Terrence Blanchard does the music for it. So I was like, yeah, this is definitely setting the stage. Mm-hmm. And I would ask this question, and it definitely connects. I was like, why don't we get more of this noir stuff set in this time? Because it lends itself to, this has to be the type of music that's playing. It can't be like something anachronistic.
That's right.
It's like, oh, here's some trap music set in the 30s. That doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And, I love that about Terrence. We gave him the DC Jazz Festival Lifetime Award last year at a big Let the Good Times Roll New Orleans party that we had at Arena Stage. And we gave that award to him because he's such a jazz champion. And I love that he finds his way to put jazz in every single genre of movie, right? I mean, he's got a great manager, his wife. And it's great. It's great for us because subliminally people are taking in those notes, right? And so next thing you know, they're like, "Oh, that's jazz. Let me go hear some jazz tonight."
That's the way that I look at like this podcast, and not to gas myself up, but the way I look at a lot of the stuff. I think you hear it, it's almost like you pull out that Shazam. What is this? It is an invitation for you to explore more. And I think that's the benefit of the education program, for sake of argument, of the festival at large. It's like, look more for this particular artist, look more for this particular genre, explore. Sit down, rest for a while, enjoy yourself.
That's right.
So I have a few questions that relate to the annual DC Jazz Fest. In your opinion, what makes, like, what are the traits of, like, 2 to 3, traits of a great jazz festival? Because you hear about the one in Montreal, you hear about all these different places, you have New Orleans. So what are the hallmarks, if you will?
So every great jazz festival, I think, is unique. And I think what makes it is that it really encompasses the culture of that town, of that city, of that state, of that country. I'm going to Umbria Jazz Fest in July. I'm going to take up all things Italian when I go there. I know it's going to be a ball. I think you do have to have a very cultural element that's centered around that, right? And then the other piece is I think it does have to be uniquely about that city. So in our case, it is uniquely at the wharf. We do other events that are uniquely at an embassy, that is at the Howard Theater. All these really iconic places that people will come to DC to experience. And so I think what makes our particular festival so great right now is the diversity of the performers. And it's intentional. So we carefully, and I work very closely with our artistic director, Willard Jenkins, and also now we bring in an artist in residence, Orrin Evans from Philadelphia is our current artist in residence. And we want to make sure that when we're giving a menu of offerings to the jazz festival patron that's coming, that it is incredibly varied. And I think that is what people get excited about. Yeah. And now it's so interesting that people don't come to the DC Jazz Festival now even because they've heard the talent. They're saying, I'm coming to DC Jazz Fest. Because they know they're going to get it. Yeah. They're going to get the experience. Yeah. They're going to get the variety. They're going to get the iconic places and of DC. And I think that's why they come. Now, this year, we're bringing Gregory Porter. And he's coming to the Anthem. To see him at the Anthem is going to be magical. Let's just be clear. And then Samara Joy, this young, gorgeous 23-year-old. She's so timeless. Her voice is incredibly timeless. She's going to be outside at the wharf on an outdoor stage, not in a cocktail lounge, where people can sip on a martini and watch her do her thing. She's going to be in a big stage. I love that.
That's great. That is so cool.
And then on the other hand, we have Arturo O'Farrill and the Afro-Latin Jazz Ensemble was closing it out. 2 years ago, we did D Nice, who closed it out. He did at a jazz-inspired dance party. People went crazy, lost their mind. Last year, we did Chuck Brown Band. We wanted to give them go-go. This year is going to be salsa.
and I love, going back for a moment, I love that notion of, like, you know, folks are coming to, you know, DC Jazz Fest, but it's also like they're coming to DC. So having that sort of component, because you know, I think that's the way that cities, or in this case a district, but in cities and communities, kind of keep their identity by embracing what that is, versus sort of a rebrand where you have cities. Oh, we're going to do what DC is doing. No, that's DC's thing.
Doesn't work.
We're going to do what New Orleans is doing. That's New Orleans' thing. Do your own thing.
Do your own thing.
Make it your own thing. Embrace it, and then the people will come.
They will come, and they will. You know, Destination DC, which is the tourism arm of DC. Elliot Ferguson, who's the president and CEO, is on our board.
Nice.
And then Events DC, the president and CEO, Angie Gates, who used to run the film and music and entertainment, she's now their president, also on our board. And what's really special is that they have the hashtag, like hashtag MyDCCool. They've been running that hashtag for years because it works. DC is cool. And so we use it because jazz is so cool in DC, so it just fits.
Yeah, it's just so many cats there in jazz.
And just so many cats. The cats come out.
So I got a couple more questions here, and so. In preparation for just the festival, like, you know, something this magnitude, could you, like, walk us through, you know, not have to go too deep, but just what does it look like, let's say, 9 months before Jazz Fest? What does it look like 3 months before Jazz Fest? I want to get into your mind.
What does it look like 11 months before Jazz Fest? So we go about the business of the good news is for our festival this year is that we've just passed a board-led 5-year strategic plan, and that allows us to start planning 2 and 3 years. We've never done that, and we need resources to do that, other things. So we are embarking on this big capital campaign for our institution because we're just that big and important. So. But right now, we start planning for the next year in December, which is pretty much 10 months out, right? And then we make offers to our headliners, right? In this case, it was Gregory Porter, Samara, and then we start to then work it from there. We build actually a map and start to say, okay, who do we want to look? We make sure that we include, make offers, and Willard does a fine job of this, of thinking about some of our elders, like Big Chief Donald Harrison from New Orleans. Yeah. He's coming. You know, or the great bassist Dave Hollins bring Kevin Eubanks. It's part of history over with Eric Harlan. They're coming. Terry Lynn Carrington's got this big social justice project that she's doing. She's coming. You know, so we said, okay, look how varied. You start to map that out, right? So we did all those offers, got those contracts in, announced that. Did our first announcement. We always like to announce, do a save the date, so that people can just start saving the date in February. Yeah. And then we started building that second tier. Still all headliners. Arturo Farrell's up there with everybody else. Etienne Charles and the Creole Soul. I mean, he's from Trinidad. He's going to bring a big old Trini party. I can't wait. I love me some Etienne. And we start building that. And then we start thinking about our DC artists, because some of the best artists, jazz artists in the world happen to reside here. Some of them are in some of the most important jazz bands in the country, and they live here. So we shine the spotlight on DC. We probably, about 150 artists we employ from the DC area. Nice. Something that we really are excited about. Then we start making sure that the venues are in order, because sometimes with our venue partners, they won't let us know till 6 months before that they're on board. I don't know why, but that's the case. The Wharf is good. We've got a 5-year contract with them. Yeah. So the Wharf is always the last 2 days. And then we do Union Stage, which is also down at the Wharf. So we check out the indoor venues. We're going to use Arena Stage since we're home there now. We'll do some big events, and we have the Anthem. But then where we're going to do our embassy event. So we're going to do one at the House of Sweden, which is down lower Georgetown. Fantastic venue. And then, here at Eaton, we're going to be here. I'd already lined up. Andrew was one of those ones. Like, Andrew, can you return my call? Because people get busy with other things. But Andrew's one of the ones. We try and make sure that we're all around the city. Another big thing we're doing is we're doing a jazz hop in Anacostia, at the Anacostia Big Chair. And that's where we're going to mix jazz and go-go. It's going to be 4 bands, all these vendors, 4 different venues down there, and with outdoor vendors selling, anything from Jamaican food to, African clothes, or, it's going to be really fantastic. And that's on Friday the 1st. And then we just sort of okay, what else is missing? We got to get uptown, so we go to Tacoma Park. We're doing something at Tacoma Station. And then the parks, we wanted to have another outdoor venue. So the parks at Walter Reed, which is the old Veterans Hospital, they've got a great venue out there with this wonderful atrium for music. We're going to do a big concert there. So we just start lining it up, and the next thing you know, that's 6 months in. So that's where we are now. Now we start to make sure our production team's in place, our seasonal workers, our volunteer recruitment's in order, and in that 3 months is when it starts. It starts really countdown to Jazz Fest.
Wow. I mean, it's robust.
It's robust, and it's a small team. We have a small team that works on this.
And definitely, I'm hearing it's very much part of the community. It's very much in the different pockets that make up this district or what have you. And, shout out to y'all. That's great.
Thank you. I embrace it. I'm a Washingtonian. I grew up on Morris Road in Southeast D.C. I am a D.C. girl all the way. And so I love this town. And to be able to just really have a place where people from all over the world are coming to Jazz Fest. And they're not just staying at the Wharf. They're going to the other venues.
Right.
And they're going to the other neighborhoods. And every neighborhood's a little different. Yeah. So it's really cool.
It's a cultural, as they use in a sort of umbrella way, there's an impact conversation that happens there. So I think, there's definitely a lot of interest and definitely a lot of reasoning behind having festivals such as this being a part of the city, being a part of the district.
That's right.
So this is the last real question. Could you speak to the importance of, festivals? I was kind of teeing it up a little bit. The DC Jazz Festival, as it relates to, the health and the preservation of jazz.
It's such a great question. It's so loaded, too. I mean, we could spend a whole conversation just talking about that. So I think that festivals are economic drivers for cities. So the reason why the government will invest in a festival, because they know that there's going to be people staying in hotels, there are going to be people going to restaurants, there are going to be people using transportation, taking taxis, shopping, all these things. And so I think that the first and foremost, a big festival like ours, that's what we are. We are an economic driver. So we do an economic impact study every year so that we can, and George Washington does it so it's independent. George Washington University School of Business does it for us. And we present that to the city every year so they have an idea of just, how much people are spending on dinner on average, how many nights people are staying at a hotel on average. So that's one piece that I think for a city. I think also that it gives an opportunity to really talk about the culture of the city, which we've been talking about on the show, throughout this show. It's really that every city is unique. And so for us, for DC used to be Chocolate City. So we're going to have this conversation.
I'm here for it.
It used to be, and a lot of us have moved. I live in Silver Spring now because I cannot afford to live in D.C. I'm CEO of the D.C. Jazz Festival, and I cannot afford to live in D.C. I tried. I tried to buy a house here. I couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
With us being this legacy of D.C., I'm third generation Washingtonian. There's so much about Chocolate City with go-go music, with so much the restaurant, the food, the Southern cuisine that's here. It's now a cosmopolitan city, and it is more of an international city, but there's still an underpinning of black culture that is and remains DC that I think our festival touches on. And I would say that a lot of other festivals in DC also have that element, which I think is important.
Yeah, it is.
And I think even for the transient person that comes here and lives here for a couple of years, they get that and they love it. They're part of it.
Yeah.
So where the real estate might be going up, and so we can't live here, we spend a lot of time here. And festivals, for the DC Jazz Festival gives us an opportunity to employ our jazz artists, to employ to provide a space for people to come and spend money at a lot of places that are maybe, for 9-10 months out of the year are just making it, just paying their bills. But when they have big festivals like Cherry Blossom, like Jazz Fest, like Folk Life Fest, people are coming into the city and then they're going to these establishments and spending money. So I love that we can actually do that. And for the big thing is just to really have this great opportunity to celebrate, right? And to just have this experience where you can bring your family, your friends, you have reunions, people that come and have their family reunions, have their university, their college reunions at Jazz Fest. And it becomes a memory-making moment for them. I think all that is really what's, the essence of what festival making is all about. And I actually took a class on it too, so all that's in there. I actually teach a class on that now. But yeah, I think it's important. I know I love a good fest. I'm going to one this summer.
I mean, verified, stamped, approved.
Yeah.
So I want to hit you real quick with 3 rapid fire questions I got for you.
Ooh, rapid fire.
As people say, don't overthink it. Just don't overthink it.
Okay.
They're fine.
Okay.
Since we had to start this off, are you getting some caffeine? I must ask, how do you take your coffee?
I take it as a latte dirty. I take it as a chai latte dirty, so I get my shot of espresso in there.
Same. I'm a dirty chai guy. I was like, let me get that. Let me get 2 of those. Thanks, appreciate it. I'm going to save the more controversial one for later. That's going to be a challenge. What are you listening to at the moment?
Oh, I'm listening to so much right now. Oh my God. So I'm listening honestly to Roy Hargrove because he was a good friend of mine. And, when I get into really the nitty gritty of my festival making, he inspires me still, even though he's no longer with us. So I've got him on Spotify right now.
That's a great answer. Oh, Spotify, huh? This is the last one. Name that one album that you could listen to for the rest of your life.
Ooh.
I know.
Oh my God, songs in the key of life.
That's a good answer. It's a really good answer.
I'm done. My kids know this, that when I'm on my deathbed, hopefully I'll be at home, in my, that's what I want on.
Yeah.
I love me some Stevie Wonder. He makes me happy whenever I get in a mode where I need to be lifted. Yeah. If I can't go out walk and go hiking, because I do a lot of that too, Stevie lifts me up.
I started off an interview with a musician. Actually, yesterday, I was trying to channel Stevie when he he introduced Dizzy Gillespie on Do I Do. I tried to channel that in my introduction.
Do you have it on tape? Do you have it?
It's what the I'll make sure you hear it. He was like, "Were you doing Do I Do?" I was like, "I did." It was actually Larry Jenkins from TCU, TSU.
So cool.
So that's actually it for the podcast, but I wanted to, 1, thank you for coming on and spending some time with me, and 2, I want to encourage you to share anything you want in a final moment, social media, website, all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
So DCJazzFest.org is a wonderful place to learn about all things Jazz Fest, so be sure to, whoever's listening, go and join the mailing list there. Also, go hear some jazz. Jazz is everywhere. It's in your restaurant when you're eating a meal. It's at the church when you're getting your church on. It's at a park in the summer. There's all these summer concert series that happen in parks, and a lot of them have jazz themes. They're at festivals. They are in performing arts. The natural places, performing arts centers, but they're also in community centers. And so please go hear jazz and introduce yourselves to artists, learn, discover a new artist. Yeah. And because jazz is really something, there is something for everyone. And then I want to just give a shout out to my beautiful 2 children who are graduating. Layla's coming out of Spelman, senior. Love you, Layla. And my son's graduating from Gonzaga High School. So they're both graduating for the first time at the same time.
That's really cool. And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Sunny Sumter from the DC Jazz Festival for coming on to the podcast. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's arts and culture in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.